Hi, everyone. As people keep rolling in, I think we can still get started. People will be rolling in throughout the day. This is, of course, a 9-hour conference, so we'll be seeing people from different time zones throughout the world enter and roll out throughout the day. So my name is Alexandre MacIsaac. I'm the Executive Director of the World Federalist Movement Canada. Very excited to be introducing our first World Federalist Conference. This is something we're planning on doing on an annual basis. So we hope to expand on this design for next year and hopefully have a conference that spreads out over multiple days. So World Federalist Movement Canada, we're a not-for-profit organization. We argue for democratic and efficient reforms to global governance systems, global governance institutions as well. And we have 5 rings. One of them is built on human rights. So we believe in human rights and justice, global environmental sustainability, and we believe in, of course, a functioning world economy that's equitable for all people of the world. The 2 themes of today make up the last 2 rings of our logo, which is global democracy. So we believe, of course, in making institutions more democratic, which we believe makes them more efficient, such as a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, to complement and eventually maybe even replace a United Nations General Assembly with more democratic mechanisms built in. The last ring is peace and security. So we believe that we deserve to live in a world free of war. And especially one of the big drivers of war is nuclear war or nuclear weapons. So we believe in nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation at all costs, something that Albert Einstein really ingrained in our movement well back after the 2 world wars. So I will go on for a land acknowledgement right now. So as an organization that promotes human rights around the world, we do acknowledge that in Canada, we have a history that needs to be recognized with regards to Indigenous peoples. I think it's important for us to collectively reflect on the significance of our presence on the lands of the Indigenous peoples we are on today. While we do meet on a virtual platform today, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast in Canada, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people that call this land home. We do this to reflect on and to acknowledge the effect of residential schools and colonialism on Indigenous families and communities, and to consider how we can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you all for attending today. I will now pass it on to World Federalist Movement Canada's incoming president, Karen Hamilton.
All right, thank you very much, Alex. And before I offer 2 or 3 minutes of a commentary on kind of who we are as a broad and big movement, I do want to thank very, very much our outgoing president, who I can see is with us, Walter Dorn. And his contribution to the movement has just been extraordinary over many, many years. And so thank you. I just saw him briefly. Thank you so much, Walter, for all that you have given and will continue to give to the movement. So thank you. A little bit of introduction to World Federalist Movement Canada. For some of you, this will be very well known. For others, it might be newer. But Alex introduced the movement briefly, and you can see all of this on our website, that we are indeed connected to the International World Federalist Movement as World Federalists of Canada, a not-for-profit, and we're an education and advocacy organization. And I think it's important to say that more than at any time in our history, the world's history that is, we are interconnected on every level of community and in terms of the various consequences of our actions as a world community. And that's really important in the context of what we're talking about today. So world federalism is engaged in finding the means to adequately and democratically address global problems. And it's one of the greatest political challenges, if not, we would probably say the greatest political challenge of our time. And we are trying as World Federalists to meet that particular challenge. We advocate, this is a direct quote from the website, we advocate for a more democratic and equitable structure to our global system, viewed through the lens of our 5 special interest areas. Alex has just highlighted 2, but our 5 areas are global democracy, global peace and security, and the Albert Einstein reference is a great one, and it's a great way to introduce World Federalism when you're out there in the world trying to recruit more World Federalists, and you start talking about Albert Einstein, people will definitely sit up and take notice. Third is world environment, global justice and human rights, and the world economy. The World Federalist Movement Canada aims to take a comprehensive look at how we can share, and the underlining is mine in that case, but I think it's a really important one. How do we share our earth most effectively? And it again is that's a good phrasing when you're trying to, as I'm sure you all are, recruit people to the World Federalist Movement. A little bit of history. World Federalist Movement International began in the 1930s and 1940s by civilians groups, and that's really important. The grassroots civilian mobilization and thinking of how we will indeed share the world in a more effective and democratic way. And it was begun by citizens groups who were concerned that the structure of the new United Nations was too similar to that of the League of Nations, which had failed to prevent World War II. And so citizens groups started to mobilize. So reform of the United Nations has always been an incredibly important part of our World Federalist movement. The first World Federalist Organization, 1937, was set up by 2 famous feminist, pacifist female suffragettes, Rosika Schwimmer and Lola Maverick Lloyd. And then there were more and more and more groups that began to develop. But the big date that certainly internationally we always mark is 1947. And the location was Montreux, Switzerland. And more than 51 organizations from 24 countries came to the Conference of the World Movement for World Federal Government. That's what it was called in those days. By the second Congress, a year later, 1948, there were 150,000 members of 19 nationalities. So this is part of our past, and we know that there are many challenges now. We know that around membership, around financing, but I think that's an important part of the past to celebrate that came out of the context of the Second World War and the concerns around the United Nations. And many of you will be very familiar with some of the international programs that the Canadian movement has been very supportive and extremely active in: the International Criminal Court, Responsibility to Protect, so many more. We have consultative status with ECOSOC at the United Nations. Now, in terms of my own history and how I come to the presidency, I have been privileged to hold leadership roles in the World Federalist Movement Canada since 1995. Chairing what was then the council, chairing the executive, chairing the board. And I have also been privileged to be on both the International Council and the International Executive. And I have seen the times when there was a great deal to celebrate and the times of challenge. And I bring both of those realities to my experience as a Canadian president. Around my other professional international roles, there are many. But the one that I think has most relevance is that I'm United Church of Canada clergy, and I served for 15 years as the General Secretary of the Canadian Council of Churches, an inclusive movement in Canada, which brings together almost all of the Christians in the country and works with all the other faith traditions. But the key part of that is that the Canadian Council of Churches, at least in this context, came into being at exactly the same time as the World Federalist Movement, like exactly the same time to the year, because it was a time of global thinking. It was a time when people were looking for different ways of being a global community in that post-Second World War period and trying to vision forward out of the disappointment that a Second World War happened and the immense tragedy of it following on the immense tragedy of the First World War. But it was a time for visioning forward. And so both the World Federalist Movement and the Canadian Council of Churches came out of that same context of world upheaval and visioning for a better way forward. We have always advocated for nuclear disarmament. You're going to be hearing so much about that. You're going to be hearing so much about the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. Andreas, I have had the privilege, I know, I'm waving at you too. On my screen, you and I are just above and below each other. I have had the privilege, Andreas, of hearing and being a part of your work for decades now, and seeing the immense dedication and vision that you have put into it, and the incredible success and the vision forward. So thank you so much, Andreas. And I commend to all of you this remarkable piece of work and how it's going to aid us in our goal of reducing the risk of nuclear proliferation. So to bring us also forward in our thinking, as Andreas is going to do, I want to just in my last minute highlight a couple of things that have been in the press lately. And it's easy to be discouraged when you look at the news in the world right now, what's happening. It's easy to be discouraged when we look at questions of membership and finances, but we are more needed now than we have ever been. And I believe we have the capacity to move forward in that need. So I am a reader of the publication, the British publication, The Economist. It's known as an economically conservative, but politically liberal publication that many of you will know well. And so one of the relationships to our work that I picked up out of The Economist publication was in the, for those of you who want to look it up, in the April 22 to 28 publication, because it's a weekly publication, page 50 in The Economist, April 22 to 28, there's an article entitled, "Why Are Civil Wars Lasting Longer?" And much of what it puts forward in that article is very relevant to what we do. But the phrase that really gripped me was the phrase that global norms are eroding. And so what we do as World Federalists is to try to establish global norms through various platforms. But this is what we do. And so our work is needed more than it ever has been before. And it goes on to talk in that specific article about Russia as a permanent member, remember, we all know well, of the UN Security Council, and brazenly violating the UN's founding charter by invading Ukraine, murdering civilians, kidnapping children. And it shows how much taboos have weakened. So our voice, our work could not be more timely right now. Impunity is becoming more common. Climate change is also fueling fights over water and land. Religious extremism is spreading. Organized criminals are making the world's most unstable states more unstable, and conflicts are growing and more complex. So I commend to us this day to listen to all of the speakers, to engage more fully in the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly work, to engage in our continuing striving to eradicate nuclear weapons. And as a final inspiration to us all, I bring you, and I can show you, the Globe and Mail, Canadian newspaper, on Thursday, I don't know how well you can see this, but on Thursday, published a small piece marking, because Thursday was June 1st, the anniversary of the creation of the Doomsday Clock, something that we are all quite familiar with. But it was on June 1st in 1947, the same time period that our roots are in, that the Doomsday Clock was created. And in 1947, as some of you will no doubt have memorized, the Doomsday Clock, which was the way of talking about, it was a symbol for how technology posed the greatest danger to the world. That was an interesting articulation in the Globe and Mail. The Doomsday Clock is a symbol of how technology, we have often interpreted it to be primarily in terms of nuclear weapons, but how technology posed the greatest danger to the world. And in 1947, on June the 1st, it was set to 7 minutes to midnight, that humanity had 7 minutes out of the span of a clock before some kind of doom would come because of the danger technology was posting to the world. Clock is reset annually, as we know. In 2023, it was, anybody know? 90 seconds to midnight in 2023. We are 90 seconds to midnight, according to this particular framing of technology, in particular nuclear weapons, and the danger they post. So let us be inspired. I commend all the speakers to you, all of the sessions to you, and it is my great privilege to serve this organization, to continue to do so, and to be a part of our moving forward for the sake of humanity and the ways in which we are going to share this world in a way that is equitable and democratic. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Karen. It was beautiful.